Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Jenkins. Welcome to the Vivit Trim SIG webinar this afternoon. And it is a big welcome to you all. Vivit Trim SIG is our official user group for Trim, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce this seminar. I'm very pleased for a number of reasons because some time now, since HP acquired Autonomy, since they bought them, there's been quite an intriguing question mark over the strategy as to why they should have done this, and we're going to get quite a bit of insight into that this afternoon. I'm particularly keen to hear this because as a Trim user and manager, I know what a really good information retrieval and management tool it is, but I also know very much that it requires disciplines, disciplines on the user to classify and label and catalog the data in terms of files and folders effectively. And I suppose you could say this is one of the downsides of it. Now, this afternoon, we're very pleased to have David Gould to help us explain the rationale behind this and as to why Hewlett-Packard have acquired Autonomy and are putting it in harness with Trim. Okay. So that's me. That's what we're about this afternoon. Your input will be welcomed, and we always look forward to having your input on things. You'll get the chance to ask questions later on in the afternoon. So if you can just hold those back until towards the end, and then we'll give you a chance to raise your questions, okay? As I say, today's presenter is David Gould, who is the worldwide business lead for HP Trim, and he's responsible for the product strategy and business direction. He's very experienced with regard to this, and he's got a great deal of experience on and focus on improving business productivity, efficiency, and compliance in software solutions. So we're very pleased to have him on board. It is going to be recorded, and it's going to be made available to all Vivit members, okay? And as I've said, we'll have a session, Q&A session, towards the end. Okay, you've got a control panel on the side of your screen, and so you will get the chance to raise your questions there, as indicated. Okay. Well, look, I think that's about enough from me. I'm really longing to hear what David's got to say about the harnessing and bringing together of Trim and Autonomy and how they can provide business benefits. Because if Autonomy can help solve some of those problems that are associated with using Trim with regard to classifying the information and the data, then I think it could lead to something of a dream ticket as far as records management is concerned. So I look forward to hearing this, and so I'm sure you do with interest. I'm going to now hand over to David Gould. Thank you.
David, thanks so much. Hang on just a second while I get my screen up. Hope everybody can see that okay. If you can't, Stephanie, maybe you can let me know, but I think that you should be able to see this. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you. I've been fortunate that I have gotten out and been able to meet with a lot of you on a personal basis. We've had some great events, most recently in the UK and in the Netherlands, and we're going to be having some events here in the States, and so that's pretty exciting. I'm talking to you today from Washington, D.C., and where I just got done doing a presentation to an HP software conference to the government sector, and as you know, we have quite a few government customers, and so it was kind of neat being here. I think the best part about being in Washington, D.C. this trip is last night I got done working and I walked over to the National Archive and stood out in front of it and took a picture, put it on my Facebook page, and I kind of felt like I was in the temple of records standing in front of the National Archives. So it totally motivated me to be even more energetic than I usually am in talking this morning. So I appreciate that, and we'll get into it. Today I'd like to kind of cover a couple of topics. One is just kind of our perception on what we see in the marketplace, where the market is, to share some of those ideas with you. And the second piece is to address the HP acquisition of autonomy. David, I love your use of the word dream team. I think coming in a past life in the world of sports, dream team is so appropriate in describing how we can address, now how we can fully address the total realm of information management across the enterprise, and I'll spend some time talking about that today as well. So again, thank you for attending and sharing your time with me as well. You know, this has been a pretty interesting time for the record people who have traditionally been in records management, because if you kind of look at our business historically, not much changed really from the time the British Armada sailed into Washington Harbor here, or before it was even known as Washington Harbor, or they sailed into these small harbors in Australia, and you know, where the captains of these great warships were jotting down and taking very copious notes and kind of actually inventing this whole notion of records. And you know, as we've kind of progressed over the last 50 to 60 years, the science of records management, for the first 50 of those 60 years, we've pretty much done the same way, because all the content was really being created from a desktop, and that was the limit to how information was created. And certainly over the last 10 years, that information creation source has changed in so many different ways, and from so many different drivers and from so many different directions. We really are kind of, to take the phrase crossing the chasm, which was a pretty popular book about 10 years ago. In my perspective, and from what we see in the marketplace, not only are we crossing the chasm, but the chasm has really been crossed from a records management perspective. We're really not doing it slowly. I mean, we're really going, the evolution is truly a revolution, and just the whole notion of where information is and how important that is to a record system is so dramatically changing today that we really need to be on top of our game, not only in terms of providing technology solutions, but also in terms of being records managers and being able to address these issues, because it's not only a matter of just classifying records, it's now a matter of cost, and it's also an opportunity of collaboration. So if you kind of take those three ideas, those are kind of the drivers of what's happening out there, and we really have to be in a position to meet that challenge. Otherwise, we're not going to succeed in our job. I think a couple of things that are most important here, and you know, we're putting out a new version of TRIM in the next couple of weeks. It's a minor release, but part of that release has the first TRIM mobile application. You know, we're going to be able to put TRIM to the iPad, and that's very, very exciting. And when you talk to some of the people who have been developing TRIM for the last 25 years, never in their wildest dreams could they have ever thought, even 5 years ago, that we would be having to consider mobile platforms, cellular phones, as part of a records management system. But today we are, and that's very exciting. So really, if you look at the changes that are affecting our business, it's not about things that are going to happen. A lot of these issues already have happened, and so we better be in a better position to manage it. One of the great things about my job is that I get to talk to a lot of you, and I get to talk to a lot of organizations around the world about what you perceive to be the most successful things in terms of making a records management system successful. And we've really kind of boiled it down based on your comments and kind of based on our view of where the world is into what I would call kind of 3 buckets. And the first bucket is this notion of ubiquitous access and management. And the fact is that when you ask a records management organization, information governance organization, what would make things successful, you really have to address the ubiquity of information. You have to address it from a security standpoint. You have to address it from a point of creation standpoint. And in today's world and in tomorrow's world, it's about creating records at any time, any place. You know, one of our really interesting customers is the International Criminal Court, and I mean, they're kind of doing the dirty work of society in that they have to send investigators out to crime scenes, war crime scenes, and, you know, capture evidence and bring it back and allow, you know, a judiciary system 10 years later in some cases to try people for, you know, the horrible things they've done to humanity. And if you think about how they're collecting evidence on cell phones, on the internet, using iPads, truly from a field perspective, all of that becoming part of a system of record, those things have to be put under consideration. So really, it's not just about the desktop any longer. It's about all of the environment around us. And again, it's important that when you think of a records management solution going forward, it has to manage this ubiquity of information. The second piece that we see, kind of trend that we see or requirement that we see is around the notion of centralized policy. And that centralized policy has to have a very strong concept around the notion of defensible disposition. A lot of organizations, all of us have kind of siloed spaces, even at HP, which really does have a best-in-class records management program. You know, we face the same challenges that everybody else does. And really, when we talk to records managers, I think one of the things they ask a lot about is, how can I develop a single policy that controls everything in my environment, not just records, but all content, and how can I do that in a way which I can propagate that policy down into the multiple systems that I have, whether it's a customer relationship management solution, whether it's a document management system, whether it's an enterprise content management system, whether it's my web portal. So really the question is, how can I push a policy down, propagate it so I can truly control all the information across my entire environment? How can I tightly integrate that policy with physical records? And, you know, how can how can I manage things on a proactive basis? And how can I achieve control, not only in terms of how I'm capturing information, but how I'm managing the cost of that capture? And at the end of the day, how am I disposing of it? I was just talking to somebody at this conference this morning, and really at the end of the day, if you don't hit that disposition button, the dispose button, your records management program is going to be deemed a failure, because if you don't dispose of things according to your policy, you're not disposing of anything, and so that's a huge issue. The third thing that we see, and I think this is really kind of the most important part, at least from a trim perspective, and this is kind of a piece that we've been focusing in on really hard over the last couple of years, is this notion of automation and transparency. And what we mean there is really simple, and that is no organization wants to have all of their employees involved in the collection, classification, and the storage of records. It just doesn't make sense. You know, even at HP, where we now have 14,000 users of trim worldwide in 173 countries, you know, the cost it takes to train all 14,000 people is really, really expensive, and it's hard, especially every time you do an upgrade. So really, the whole idea is around how can you capture records with minimal or no user impact, and then use that policy that you've established to drive the automatic classification of information. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but going back to this Bing team analogy that David Jenkins just mentioned during his introduction, you know, one of the greatest things that that's happened to trim has been the acquisition of autonomy, because instead of waiting, you know, I will tell you that we had on our product plan auto classification and more transparency of application of the product, and it was going to take us probably another 2 years to get to the state where we thought we could be effective in that way. With the acquisition of autonomy, especially with the application of a product they have called Control Point, we are now able to offer auto classification and deduplication for trim and be able to apply and be able to closely link the capabilities of Control Point with TRIM to really truly provide an automated and transparent records management system. And we're very, very excited about that. Essentially, we've taken about 2 years of time and shortened it down to 3 to 4 months. We're in the process now of completing that integration process, and we're going to be able to offer some very exciting new solutions around automation and transparency in the very near future. So I'm very, very excited about that. And, you know, at the end of the day, the acquisition of Autonomy has really expanded our portfolio at HP, allowing us truly to offer a holistic approach to records management, to information governance. I'll get into that in just a little while. This next slide, I love this picture here because graphically we've kind of just been able to describe, and I thank the Open Compliance and Ethics Group for providing this picture, but if you take a look at this picture, I mean, what organization doesn't have these problems? Even the best of class organizations, the ones who are kind of rated in the upper quartile of information governance practice, have these issues. You know, lack of visibility, poor integration, duplication, wasted information. All of these things are critically important to an organization from an information governance perspective. And unless you are able to provide solutions that address the totality of these issues, you're not going to have a successful program. You're going to increase your risk exposure as well as increase your cost, which is becoming an increasing factor in the information governance area. So, I mean, really what we see happening in the world is that records management, the days when we sat in an office and put things into a file box, is really transforming very quickly into an information governance story. And what we mean by information governance is very simple. It's being able to mitigate the risk of collection of information and management of information, and to provide cost containment. And I think that the other thing that's really becoming more and more apparent to me is not only can you lower costs with an effective information governance program, not only can you mitigate risk with an effective information governance program, but you can also really improve the efficiency and productivity of your work team. You can provide access to information that provides a sense of higher level of collaboration, SharePoint or no SharePoint. And I think that this is really kind of a compelling reason, these three pieces, to think about transforming your records management operations into an information governance solution. And the implications for records managers is really clear. We all need to be in close coordination and contact with our information technology organization. We need to be part of an overall corporate strategy. I'm going to get into that in just a few moments, but you really need to look at the problem of managing information from a strategic point of view and not just from a records management point of view. Here are some of the elements of an information governance platform, and some of these elements are directly related. I think back to that slide I just had up a couple slides ago, which talked about those three key buckets around about ubiquity, management of ubiquitous information, centralized policy, and automation and transparency. So kind of, you know, when you really think about what I think is, you know, the real driver behind all of this, is one of the key issues is you really need to look at this, what I term as the information management challenge. And what I mean by that is, you know, every organization has within it kind of what I would call a business as usual layer, which is usually managed by the information technology organization. And every organization does the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you're in a government organization, large or small, or an enterprise organization, it's localized or global. All of us do the same sorts of things day in and day out, running our business as usual. We build things, we operate things, we secure things, we store things, and we analyze things. And we do this day in and day out. And this is what every information technology organization does globally. At the top of our business, there's something called the governance layer, and I call that kind of the business as required layer. So really what you have there is, this is not what you do, this is what you must do. to meet your business obligations, and those obligations can be driven by government mandate. If you're a government organization, it could be driven by presidential directive, or it can be driven by security standard, or some other, cost reduction or waste reduction initiative. And if you're obviously in private enterprise, clearly your customers, your suppliers, your the organizations which you have to comply with local requirements, tax organizations, all of those things are giving you a list of requirements. And the irony is, or kind of the issue really is the information that you need to collect from a business's required at the business's required level really has a direct relationship to what's being done at the business as usual level of your organization. The problem is for most organizations is that there's this gap between what you must do and what you do on a daily basis. And the question is, how can you address that effectively from an information governance perspective? Compounding it is this information explosion, the fact that the IT organization and the entire business or the entire enterprise is now managing multiple sources, multiple methods, multiple on-ramps of information, and information is growing very, very rapidly. It's almost out of control. And if you think about it, then you also have to dispose of information in a defensible way. Otherwise, you're not running a very effective program. Our position, at HP Autonomy is real clear, is that with a strong information governance platform, you can tie together what you must do at the required level to what you do at the usual level, and what you do at the usual level to the required level, and create a strong relationship between the governance of your organization and the transaction, the business layer of your organization, and also manage in a very effective way the explosive nature of information sprawl that's occurring everywhere, every day, and will continue to do so in the future. I think all of us are probably pretty familiar with this idea, but the information paradox, that really 80% of all information that's being created today is of unstructured nature. And if you look at IDC and Gartner Group, both these organizations are predicting tremendous growth in the world of the digital universe to 35 zettabytes by the year 2020. And I'm not too sure what a zettabyte is, but if you think of just about a gigabyte, 1,000 megabytes is a terabyte, and 1,000 terabytes is a petabyte, organizations are managing tremendous amounts of information. And then if you apply kind of the Gartner standard that it costs between $75 and $150 at the top end to manage a gigabyte of information, and you multiply that out by the number of by the amount of information that you're managing, you can then see what it's costing you to manage information across your enterprise. And there's a lot of drivers to this. I mean, SharePoint, which is a big part of the TRIM story, most of you know that, is that SharePoint is driving the the collection and creation of information at a dramatic rate as well. And then if you kind of look at the cost of managing a SharePoint site at $46 a user, you can imagine what it costs to manage all this unstructured information. The irony is, while information is growing most explosively on the unstructured side, most of the corporate IT budgets that we have are addressing only the structured side of our business. About 80% of the IT budget today is focused on controlling between 15 and 20% of the information that's being collected in an organization. And that doesn't really seem right to me. So the real issue is, if you think about it, if you're spending all that money just on structured data, how are you managing all of this unstructured data, which is in your enterprise? And for most organizations, certainly from a records management perspective, it doesn't leave a lot of money left over to address innovation, and it doesn't leave enough money left over to address the unstructured explosion of information, which is causing the biggest problem of information sprawl within any organization today. And I think the other thing that's really driving this is not only is information exploding, but the environment or the ecosystems that we've created over time really are changing so rapidly. The problems just seem to be compounding and growing faster and faster. Currently, the practices that we have designed or defined for managing information are kind of falling short. You know, most of our policies are focused in on managing content created at the desktop. You know, I ask yourself, how many of you have policies that are focused in on managing content that's created in social media? How many of you have policies that are focused in on managing and controlling information that's collected or displayed on YouTube or on mobile devices? And I mean, I would think that very few people in the records world are addressing the structured side of the business, which is where a lot of a risk and exposure can occur. You know, at HP, we've implemented HP Trim, and the application has really been focused in almost entirely now on our structured records, and that's because the legal department did an analysis. They hired a consulting firm and said, you know, HP, you have your biggest sense of exposure within all of the structured records around accounts payable, tax information, and you better address that first. So over the last 18 months, HP has aggressively rolled out Trim. We're fully deployed now at HP. And what's interesting is that before Trim, the corporation had about 1.5 million records. And since Trim has been put into place, our record count is now over 120 million records. During the month of February of this year alone, we added about 20 million records to the HP Trim system. And, you know, we're really being able to put our arms around this. And the next step in our corporate records program is to address the SharePoint situation, which, you know, we have over 100,000 SharePoint sites at HP. And if you go back and you multiply that $46 per user cost against those 100,000 sites, against the 300,000 employees at HP, you can see that HP is spending a lot of money on SharePoint. And the reality is that there's a lot of content that's being put out in that environment that's not being managed or controlled. And in many cases, it's just sitting there in kind of an inert way because the SharePoint site is no longer active. But the question then becomes, how do you harvest that information? How do you manage that information? How do you govern the information in your SharePoint environment? And I have to say that Trim already has a great integration. I think most of you know that with SharePoint. And coming very soon from us will be a total comprehensive operational and management solution for governing your SharePoint investment as well. So there's a lot of things that the autonomy acquisition has brought to us. Most important, it allows us to address the issues that are on this page and allows you to address things not only from a risk perspective but from a cost perspective as well. And I think that's a very exciting thing, that the investment you've made in Trim is going to be leveraged into a very, very exciting future. Since I am in Washington, D.C. today, I tried to give a little bit of a government focus. I don't know how many of our government customers are logged on to the discussion today, but this slide is not only for you, it's for the rest of us as well. Most of you know the White House issued a memorandum in 2011 about managing government records. And I think this is really, you kind of take some of the key words out of here, this is a very, very important initiative. Now, the specifics of this initiative will be announced in June when the General Services Administration kind of interprets what this initiative means or what this mandate means. But it really is about improving efficiency, eliminating redundancy, lowering costs, and I think the most important thing on here is the recognition that an information governance program that's centered on a record system really can help share knowledge within and across any organization. This applies to the government as well as to the private sector as well, and I think this is very, very significant. At the end of the day, you know, from a records management perspective in today's world, now that we've crossed the chasm, it's really about what is, you know, how do you define what that desired state should be? If you ask records managers or information governance managers to define the dream system, these four things are kind of the key things that really drive what's happening from kind of that nirvana desired state. You know, clearly it's around capturing sufficient metadata and be able to enhance that metadata through automation and classification technologies. You know, it's kind of handling information in a repeatable way with a methodology behind it. Policy, you know, how do you drive policy clearly and precisely across your entire organization? And then we have this thing called the cloud that's sitting out there. And it was pretty interesting when I came to HP, and actually today is, I think, my second anniversary, so happy anniversary to myself. But when I came here and became involved with the TRIM business unit, you know, when you asked about the cloud, at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of focus on what the cloud's impact would be on, assessing what the cloud's impact would be on records management. Clearly today, that's a very, very different story. So clearly, if you kind of look at records management, information governance going forward, you need to have the cloud as part of that strategy. And within that cloud, you must be able to verify and limit data location so you can meet local jurisdictional requirements. So kind of what's the ultimate solution? And with the acquisition of autonomy, I think we're driving to that very, very quickly. And from our standpoint, the whole idea of being able to get a centralized view across your entire enterprise, have a single system of record, have a single system of policy that's driving that system. And I think, you know, this idea of this third bullet, purpose and meaning behind all information, is understood. I think that's a critical value-added element that autonomy gives us today that we didn't have. The ability to connect into the concept of meaning, or to introduce the concept of meaning into a record system, we clearly didn't have. And it was on our roadmap, but it was on our roadmap from 3 to 4 years from now. We have that capability now today, and with the introduction of TRIM 7.2, which has the idle search engine in it, and the ability now to be able to create meaningful relationships, or to be able to create meaning between content, it has been greatly accelerated, and that's going to significantly improve the ability to provide information governance to your organization. And at the end of the day, I think it's really important that we provide compliance, transparency, and accountability, and clearly the solutions that we bring forward into the market will do that. I want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about GARP. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. This is an initiative that's been driven forth by ARMA, American Records Management Association, the international group. And I don't know if many of you know this, but my new boss, Galina Daskowski, is president of ARMA International. And I think, you know, if you kind of analyze and assess one of the benefits of the autonomy acquisition by HP is not only have we got our hands on some really cool technology, significant technology that will help us improve records management, information governance, we've also acquired a significant group of experts on records management, starting with Galina. We have a group of subject matter experts that have been brought in, and these people have been in the records industry for, you know, 10, 15, 20 years. They have been records managers at large organizations, and they're now part of our team. And so not only can we provide great technology solutions, but we also have the ability to provide a consultative approach to what you're doing from an information governance perspective, and I think that's incredibly important too. Getting back to the GARP story, you know, the GARP is really a framework that allows you to manage the effectiveness of your records management program and sets forth some standards upon which you implement it. It's not quite like an ISO framework or like a COSO framework, which was used by the Securities and Exchange Commission to provide guidance on how you should set up your corporate response to Sarbanes-Oxley. But it is a platform and framework that allows you to adhere to and measure records and information governance standards. And I think that in the day of cost containment and productivity added into the record story, this is an incredibly important idea. If you're not familiar with GARP, please let Stephanie know, and we can send you a very cool white paper that we have on GARP that's been produced by ARMA that gives you the next few slides in a lot more detail. So what is GARP? GARP is really about the 8 things that you see on the screen, and it's providing you a systemized way of implementing a system that provides you accountability, transparency, integrity, protection, compliance, availability, retention, and disposition in a way that is going to improve the efficiency of your organization, but also give you a very important notion of metrics that allows you to measure what it is you're doing against some international standards. And I think, just as CEOs are asking CIOs to become best in class, I think corporate legal executives and CEOs are going to be coming into their into the IT and into the records domains and saying, you know what, I want to be best of class as well. Because best of class is not only about having a best practice approach to things, best of class also means the ability to lower operational costs and invest money in areas where the greatest return is. And certainly when you look at unstructured information and being able to manage that, that's clearly a target that most CEOs, most corporate legal offices have on their radar. And GARP is a platform that allows you to tell your organization how well you're doing. So I have a few slides that gives a little bit more about this information. I think all of us have kind of a senior records officer who oversees the program. If you don't have one person who's in charge, really, before you do anything else, your organization must have established the notion of accountability around someone who's responsible. So hopefully most of you are already living to this GARP principle. And as you can see, there's a variety of different responsibilities. I've taken those 8 things and here they are with a little bit more detail. And again, if you contact Vivit, we'll make sure that we get this white paper posted on the Vivit website, because it's really important in giving you a lot of detailed information on establishing a strategy and a scorecard for measuring the effectiveness of what you're doing. I think the most important thing, records is really at the end of the day about disposing of information in a defensible way. And it's sort of like, I've used this analogy before, all of us at our houses, our homes, have a drawer in the kitchen where we just put stuff into. I'm sorry? I thought I heard somebody asking a question. All of us have a drawer that we put stuff into. I know every 6 months I go into my kitchen drawer and I dump everything out onto a counter and I throw away all the soy sauce packets, all the rubber bands, and all of the chopsticks that I've accumulated. But I also manage to keep the information that's important to me. So I dispose of information that's not important. I also throw away, I have a personal practice of going into my files every year and saying, geez, here's what I can throw away. I don't need it anymore because it's taking up way too much room in my garage or my closet. But I mean, this really, from a personal level, extends into the corporate or to the business level very quickly. So defensible disposition, that's driven from a managed retention policy is becoming increasingly important. And I think all of us need to go in and take a look at our disposition policies and our retention policies and make sure that we are adhering to those requirements that we've set forth for ourselves, because otherwise the cost of management and the risk exposure is going to be extremely high. So there's a lot of information. So again, the GARP principle, this white paper that I'm promoting pretty heavily today, gives you an opportunity to say, where do I start? How do I do my assessment? How do I perform a risk assessment? How do I understand where my gaps are in my program? And then how do I close those gaps? And most importantly, how do I develop a strategic long-term roadmap that allows me to deploy an effective information governance standard across my organization? So David kind of set this up at the beginning, talking about kind of what the autonomy acquisition by HP means. What it really means at the end of the day is that we now have the opportunity with TRIM and with the autonomy technology truly to provide a transformational solution to you, so you can go back to your organization and say, with an investment in this technology, I will be able to deliver a very specific return on investment. Our solution now covers both structured and unstructured information together. TRIM has introduced in 7.2 a very powerful in-place management system. This is going to be enhanced by Control Point, the autonomy tool, through the IDLE platform, which really is the driver now of kind of the underpinning platform of all of our information governance solutions, to be able to fully understand meaning in the context of all of your information, running analytics against that record processes in real time, and really making records management the foundation of your information governance strategy. I think this is what we're driving to in HP Autonomy. This is the benefit of the autonomy acquisition by HP, and this is what we're going to be able to offer to you in the marketplace very, very soon. We have some very, very exciting things that we're working